Episode 1, The Prayer That Echoed Back. The first time Sister Agnes heard her own prayer echo back, it was past midnight. The rain had not yet fallen, but the air smelled like wet earth and something metallic, something old. She was returning from the convent in the valley, walking the lonely road that led through the forest. At the heart of it lay the crossroads, four paths meeting in the shape of a crucifix. She stopped, knelt, and whispered her nightly prayer. "Deliver us from temptation, O Lord." And from the darkness, the same words answered. "Deliver us from temptation, O Lord." It was her own voice, soft, trembling, but not hers. Agnes froze. The forest was still. The wind had stopped. Only the echo remained, fading like breath on glass. She clutched her rosary until the beads dug into her skin. Then, slowly, she whispered again. "Forgive us our trespasses." This time, the echo waited. Then it replied, lower, heavier. "You have not been forgiven." The voice was not an echo now. It came from behind the wooden crucifix that stood at the center of the crossroads, a rough, ancient thing leaning slightly, its base swallowed by the dirt. Agnes took a step closer. Her candle flickered. The figure of Christ seemed to twitch in the flame. "Who speaks?" she demanded, though her voice quivered. "You do," it whispered. The crucifix pulsed, as though breathing. Its eyes, wooden, uncarved eyes, began to bleed dark tears that steamed in the cold night. The sound that followed was faint but unmistakable, weeping. Agnes stumbled back, crossing herself again and again. "I am a servant of God," she cried. The voice sighed. "Then why did you pray for his death?" Her breath stopped. No one knew. No one could have known. The young priest, Father Lucien, had died in the river months ago, swept away during confession. And in her secret shame, Agnes had begged God to take him. To end the sin neither could resist. "No," she whispered, shaking. "That was a moment of weakness. I repented." "You prayed," the voice interrupted, "and I listened." The wind returned with a sudden howl, scattering her candlelight. The crossroads disappeared into darkness. Then, faintly, she saw him, Father Lucien, standing behind the crucifix, pale as moonlight, water dripping from his mouth. He smiled the same way he had that last night in the chapel. "You said he would forgive us," he murmured. "You lied." She tried to run, but her feet would not obey. The earth beneath the crossroads shifted, softening like wet clay. Hands rose from it, cold, gray, grasping at her ankles. Lucien reached out, touching her cheek. "Pray again," he said gently. "Let's see who answers this time." Her scream was swallowed by the rain that finally broke. When morning came, the sisters found her rosary looped around the crucifix, beads blackened, the cross reversed. And from then on, every night, travelers swore they heard a woman's voice at the crossroads, praying not for salvation, but for silence. Episode 2, The Man Who Buried His Faith. The man arrived at the crossroads at dusk, the hour when the light forgets which side it belongs to. He was called Elias Ward, a soldier returned from a war no one remembered, carrying wounds no one could see. The people in town said he walked like a man being followed. They were right. Under his coat, Elias carried a small wooden rosary, broken, blood-stained, missing 2 beads. It had belonged to his mother. He'd worn it through every battle, every prayer whispered into mud and smoke. But the day his best friend died in his arms, staring up at a sky that didn't listen, Elias decided faith was a lie. He came to the crossroads that night to bury it. Rain began to fall as he reached the center, the same crooked crucifix Sister Agnes had once knelt before. The soil there was soft, always damp, as if something beneath it breathed. Elias dug with his hands until the mud caked under his nails. "This is where it ends," he muttered. No more prayers. No more lies. He dropped the rosary into the hole and covered it, pressing the earth flat with his palm. Then, as if to seal the act, he spat on the ground. The thunder answered. A single lightning bolt split the horizon, white and merciless. For an instant, Elias thought he saw someone standing at the opposite path, a figure in uniform, drenched, staring back. But when the light faded, there was no one. He laughed under his breath. Ghosts. Always ghosts. By the time he reached his cabin, his boots were soaked. He poured himself a drink and stared into the fire. But when he lifted the glass, something cold brushed against his neck. He froze. Hanging there, glistening in the flickering light, was the rosary. The same one he had buried. The beads were wet not from rain, but with something darker, thicker. Blood. Elias dropped it, heart pounding. He stumbled back, whispering, "No. I buried you." The rosary pulsed on the floor. A whisper crawled from it, low and distant, like a voice underwater. "You buried your faith, but it found you first." He kicked it toward the fire, but before it touched the flames, every candle in the room extinguished. The fire itself died with a hiss. Darkness swallowed him whole. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Dragging through wet soil. He turned toward the door. A silhouette stood outside the window, its hand pressed against the glass. The palm was marked with a hole, not a wound, but a tunnel clean through. From it dripped blood that steamed in the cold air. The voice returned. "You asked for silence, Elias. Now listen to what silence sounds like." The room filled with the echo of distant battle cries, his own men screaming, the roar of fire, the prayers of dying soldiers repeating his name. Elias fell to his knees, covering his ears, but the sounds came from inside his head now, prayers he once muttered, now twisted and desperate. "Stop," he cried. "Please. You buried me," the voice whispered, "and I carried you back." When dawn came, the cabin was empty. The neighbors found only a trail of bloody footprints leading toward the crossroads and a crucifix carved into the door, upside down. They say if you stand there at dusk, you can still hear the sound of digging one shovel, over and over, and a voice murmuring through the soil. Amen. 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 Episode 3, The Child Who Spoke in Psalms. They found the child at dawn barefoot, covered in mud, standing in the middle of the crossroads as if she'd been waiting all night. She couldn't have been more than 7. Pale hair, white as candle wax. Eyes the color of storm water. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just held a torn Bible so old that even the priests couldn't name the language written inside. The townsfolk took her to St. Leora's orphanage, where the sisters cleaned her wounds and tried to feed her. She refused everything but water. When they asked her name, she looked up with lips trembling, and whispered a single word. Psalm. At first, they thought she was repeating something from the scriptures. But when night fell, the air in the orphanage changed. Every candle dimmed, the crucifix on the wall began to tilt, and the child began to hum. Low. Melodic. Holy. Until it wasn't. Sister Miriam, the matron, was the first to notice. The song the girl hummed wasn't any psalm known to man. It carried no melody, only rhythm, like something ancient calling through bone and air. And then she spoke. In her tiny voice, she began to recite verses. But they weren't from any Bible printed on earth. Blessed are the broken, for their blood will mend the gates, she said. Cursed are the mouths that deny the whisper, for they shall never sleep again. The candles flared. Every child in the dormitory woke screaming. Their prayers tangled in the dark like birds trapped in wire. Miriam rushed to the girl's bed. "Psalm," she said, shaking her. "Who taught you those words?" The girl stared up at her. "He did," she said. "Who?" The girl pointed toward the window, toward the forest road that led to the crossroads. That night, they found footprints in the mud beneath the orphanage window. Bare, large, deep. Too deep. Over the next 3 nights, the child's recitations grew louder. The verses changed, each one stranger than the last, predictions, lamentations, fragments of prayers that made no sense. And yet, the walls began to bleed where the words were spoken. Miriam called for Father Ansel, the parish priest. He arrived with holy water and trembling hands. When he entered the child's room, she smiled at him, a smile that didn't belong to a child. "Father," she said sweetly, "you came late." He froze. "You know me? Everyone who prays too long ends up here." Before he could reply, she opened the old Bible and began to chant again. The letters on the page glowed faintly, rearranging themselves into shapes that writhed like living worms. The walls shook. A scream tore through the air, not hers, but from beneath the floor. When it ended, the girl fell silent. The Bible turned to ash in her hands. Father Ansel fell to his knees, weeping. "What are you?" he whispered. The girl turned her head toward the window. "A traveler," she said. "Like you will be." And then she smiled again, this time with blood on her teeth. At sunrise, she was gone. Her bed empty, her rosary snapped in two. But from the crossroads, the villagers heard something faint, echoing through the fog. A child's voice, reciting in perfect rhythm. "The roads will open when the faithful lose their tongues. The soil will speak when the last prayer ends." And somewhere, beneath that cursed ground, something answered, softly, patiently, as if waiting for the next verse. Episode 4, The Priest Who Found His Shadow Kneeling. Father Gabriel had long stopped believing in miracles. He believed in structure, in ritual, in the order of things, the way confession cleansed, the way prayer silenced thought. But after what happened to Sister Agnes and the missing orphan called Psalm, silence no longer felt holy. It felt watched. When the bishop sent him to bless the crossroads, Gabriel obeyed. He carried a crucifix, a vial of holy water, and a conviction that faith, if wielded properly, could still tame whatever superstition gripped this town. The villagers followed him only halfway, refusing to go closer. They said the ground there whispered. That the last man who stood at its center heard someone praying his own prayers before he could speak them aloud. Gabriel dismissed it all. "Fear," he muttered, "is the devil's language." But when he reached the crossroads, the air turned colder. The woods around him seemed to lean inward, branches forming a cathedral of shadow. He drew the crucifix and began the blessing. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. His shadow. It wasn't following him. It was kneeling. Gabriel froze. The candlelight he carried flickered, trembling as if afraid. His shadow's head bowed low, hands clasped, praying. He lifted his foot, but the shadow didn't move. It stayed there, worshipping something in front of him. "Get up," Gabriel whispered. "In the name of Christ." The shadow's head turned. Slowly. Too slowly. And though it had no face, he felt its gaze pierce him. Then it began to speak. Not aloud, but through the air itself. The wind carried its voice, thin and sharp as a blade. "Why do you pray, Father, when you no longer believe you're heard?" Gabriel stumbled back. "Who are you?" The shadow rose to its feet. It mimicked his shape, but taller, thinner, like a memory stretched by pain. When it reached for the crucifix, the real one in his hand grew cold. "I am what you left behind," it said. "Every word you spoke without meaning. Every prayer you recited without faith." Gabriel dropped the candle. Darkness swallowed the crossroads, yet the shadow glowed faintly, its edges shimmering like hot coal. He fell to his knees, trembling. "You're not real," he whispered. The shadow smiled, though it had no mouth. "Neither is your God, Father. But we both speak in his name." Then it knelt again, facing the crucifix at the center of the crossroads. Gabriel followed its gaze, and saw something he would never tell another soul. The wooden Christ was weeping black tears. Not downwards, but upward, seeping back into the wounds. As though time itself was being reversed, as though the cross rejected its own suffering. The ground began to pulse, beating like a buried heart. Gabriel's voice broke. "Deliver me, O Lord." And the shadow answered, echoing him perfectly, word for word, until he could no longer tell which voice was his. When morning came, the villagers found his cassock folded neatly by the crossroads. No blood. No footprints. Only 2 kneeling impressions in the dirt, one human, one not. That night, travelers swore they saw a faint silhouette beside the crucifix, head bowed in eternal prayer. They say if you whisper a confession at the crossroads now, a voice answers back in a priest's gentle tone, asking only one question. Do you still mean it? Episode 5, The Mirror Behind the Cross. It began with a rumor. They said if you walked the crossroads at midnight and faced the crucifix long enough, you could see your reflection in its eyes. Not the reflection of who you were, but who you'd become when God stopped looking. Clara Bell didn't believe in stories. She believed in evidence and in ghosts. She'd spent years hunting them with cameras and tape recorders, her YouTube channel filled with proof no priest dared watch. When she heard about the crossroads, she saw it as another story to exploit. But the first time she arrived, something felt different. The crucifix stood crooked and wet, its wood blackened from years of rain. The mud sucked at her boots like breath. The air shimmered faintly, as if every shadow held its own heartbeat. She set up her camera, pressed record, and whispered into the dark. If there's something here, I'm not afraid of you. The wind stopped. The forest stilled. The screen flickered. Behind the crucifix, something glinted, a shard of glass buried halfway in the soil. She brushed away the mud and pulled it free. It was part of a mirror, cracked, its surface fogged like old breath. Perfect, she murmured. Symbolic. She lifted it to the crucifix. For a moment, the reflection showed only her face, pale and uncertain. But then, slowly, her reflection smiled, while she did not. The grin widened, splitting too far, showing too many teeth. Clara dropped the mirror, heart pounding. The glass didn't shatter, it sank into the dirt, as though swallowed. She stared. Okay, she whispered, voice trembling. That's new. The wind returned, this time carrying the faintest whisper, a woman's voice, breathless, prayer-like. Do you seek truth, or absolution? Clara turned, scanning the dark. Who's there? Truth costs nothing, the voice said, until it asks for you in return. Her camera began to record on its own, lens turning toward the crucifix. Through the viewfinder, the cross no longer stood alone. There were faces behind it, blurred, human shapes pressed against something invisible, like prisoners behind glass. She blinked and the shapes turned their heads toward her, moving in perfect unison. She stumbled back, whispering, No, that's a trick of the light. The reflection in the camera laughed. Then the crucifix groaned, wood splintering, as if something inside it was pushing out. A sliver of silver glass slid from the cracks, forming a tall mirror behind the cross. Its surface rippled like water, and one by one, the faces from her screen appeared within it. Clara saw herself among them, but older, eyes hollow, mouth open in silent prayer. "No," she gasped. "That's not me. That's not." Her reflection reached through. Its hand pressed against the glass from the inside. When she moved, it didn't follow, it waited. "Please," she whispered. "What do you want?" "To remember you," it said. The mirror pulsed once, and she felt herself pulled forward. Her camera fell to the mud, still recording as her body vanished into the silver surface. The reflection smiled, lifted a finger to its lips, and whispered, "Amen." When the police found the footage the next day, it ended with her standing perfectly still before the mirror, eyes black, face motionless. And behind her, faintly visible, were the outlines of dozens of others, each one frozen mid-prayer, mouths moving in perfect rhythm, whispering, "Deliver us from ourselves." Episode 6, The Bells That Rang Without a Church. The first time the bells rang, there was no church left to ring them. The storm had rolled in fast, black clouds swallowing the moon, thunder crawling low like something alive. In the town of Velmere, people locked their doors and whispered prayers they barely remembered. They had learned not to mention the crossroads after dark. But when midnight came, the air trembled with sound, bells, deep and mournful, echoing from beneath the earth. Not from the church, that old ruin had collapsed years ago, but from the forest road, where the crossroads waited. The bells were too many to count. Some tolled slow and heavy, others quick and frantic, as though rung by trembling hands. Dogs howled. Windows shook. The sound carried the weight of mourning and invitation all at once. At the rectory, Father Matteo woke with a start. The crucifix above his bed was vibrating, tiny cracks spreading through the wood. He pressed his hand to the wall, and felt it, the rhythm, the toll of the buried bells. He dressed quickly, heart-hammering, and ran toward the sound. The rain had turned the streets to rivers, but he didn't care. The bells were calling him, pulling him. When he reached the crossroads, lightning revealed something impossible. The ground there was moving. Rising. As if beneath the soil, an entire cathedral was trying to breathe. And from the cracks between the stones, light spilled out, dim, golden, the color of candle flames seen through tears. "God preserve us," Matteo whispered. The next peal of the bells was so loud it threw him to his knees. He covered his ears, but the sound pressed through flesh and bone, vibrating inside his skull. Then, beneath the thunder, he heard another sound, voices. A choir. Hundreds of them. Singing. The hymn was beautiful and wrong, like hearing angels weep in reverse. The words twisted through Latin and something older, their melody spiraling until it became unbearable. Matteo crawled toward the crucifix at the center of the crossroads, shouting into the storm. "In Christ's name, stop this." The ground split open. A bell, ancient and blackened by time, rose slowly from the earth, still ringing though no hand touched it. It hung there in the air, suspended by nothing, its mouth open like a wound. Inside its hollow, faces turned, human faces, pale and eyeless, mouths moving in silent harmony. One voice separated from the rest. "Father, you left the door open." Matteo froze. He knew that voice. "Sister Agnes." "Impossible," he gasped. "You died." "We all did." The bells tolled again, and every face in the metal screamed at once, a sound like heaven cracking. The crossroads trembled. The crucifix fell forward, shattering against the mud. Matteo tried to flee, but hands burst from the ground, cold, translucent, grasping his cassock. He fell backward, staring as the bell began to melt, its metal dripping into the soil like blood. The voices faded, leaving one last whisper. "Mass has begun, Father. You are late." When dawn came, the bells were silent. The villagers found no trace of Father Mateo, only a hole where the crossroads had been, filled with still water. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, that water ripples on its own. And if you lean close enough to hear it, a faint ringing echoes from beneath, joined by voices softly chanting, Domini, dona nobis pacem. Lord, grant us peace. But no one dares to answer. Because everyone in Velmare knows. The bells don't ring for the living anymore. Episode 7, The Angel Who Fell in the Rain. The rain that night came without warning, thick, heavy, endless. It fell like judgment. Jonas Hale had been walking for hours, the storm chasing him through the valley roads until he found himself standing at the crossroads. The lightning above flashed white against the crucifix, turning it into a silhouette that looked more like a gallows than salvation. He was a wanderer, a man with more scars than stories, carrying a bottle of cheap whiskey and the kind of sorrow that keeps you alive only to punish you. He didn't believe in curses. Or angels. Or God. But the crossroads believed in him. The thunder rolled, splitting the sky, and then he saw it. Something falling. A shape cut through the storm, wings outstretched, burning faintly as it crashed into the mud with a sound that wasn't quite human. The impact shook the trees, and for a moment, the rain stopped as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Jonas ran toward the crater. His boots sank into black water, and when he reached it, he froze. Lying there, face down in the mud, was a winged man. His feathers glistened silver under the stormlight, each one humming softly, vibrating like strings of a dying harp. His body was pale, skin glowing faintly. And where his wings met his shoulders, the flesh was torn cut, not broken, as if someone had ripped them off deliberately. Jonas knelt beside him. Jesus. The figure stirred. Eyes opened, gray, endless, too bright to belong to this world. Don't call his name, the angel whispered. He can't hear you here. Jonas stumbled back. You're an angel? The being smiled faintly. I was. What happened to you? The angel's gaze drifted toward the crucifix. I fell, or perhaps I was thrown. The crossroads doesn't care which. Lightning struck nearby, and for an instant, Jonas saw movement, shadows crawling beneath the puddles, shifting like worms under glass. He helped the angel sit up. The feathers near his back were blackening, curling at the edges. You're dying, Jonas said. The angel turned to him. So are you. Jonas laughed bitterly. Story of my life. The angel reached for him, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. You carry a prayer, he said softly. A prayer you never spoke. Jonas froze. What? Say it. Here. Before this place takes it for you. I don't pray. Then you will die unheard. The storm roared louder. The ground trembled beneath them. The angel looked upward, tears mixing with the rain. They're coming. Who? Jonas shouted. The ones who live beneath the crossroads. The ones who trade faith for breath. The mud at their feet began to bubble. Hands pale, faceless, skeletal rose from the soil, reaching for the angel's wings. He screamed, a sound so piercing it cracked the air. Jonas pulled him away, shouting, Fight them! The angel looked at him one last time, eyes burning with something like mercy and guilt. Do you know why angels fall, Jonas? He whispered. Because they forget who they're praying to. Then his body convulsed, light pouring from every wound. The rain turned to ash. The crucifix glowed. And when the light faded, the angel was gone, nothing left but feathers scattered like snow. Jonas stood there, trembling, soaked in silence. He looked down at his hands. One feather lay in his palm, still warm, humming faintly. And etched into it, as if carved by lightning, were the words, "No one leaves the crossroads unremembered." He walked away that night, never speaking of what he saw. But the next morning, the villagers found something new. The crucifix had grown wings, black, charred, and dripping. And from its mouth, in the voice of a dying man, came a single whisper. Amen. Episode 8, The Bride in the Confessional. They said the bride was seen again. Not in white, but in ashes. The night she died, the church bells never rang, only thunder. Her name was Evelyn Marin, the daughter of a tailor and the pride of the small town of Velmare. On the day of her wedding, she walked down the aisle radiant and trembling, clutching a bouquet of lilies. By nightfall, both she and her groom were dead. The villagers said lightning struck the chapel. Others whispered that Evelyn had cursed her vows. But one truth remained: every year, on the anniversary of her wedding, someone heard her crying at the crossroads. It was there that Father Lucan first saw her. He had been sent to restore the desecrated shrine, the same crucifix that now leaned, charred and winged. He came with tools, oil, and a worn heart, thinking he was repairing wood and not faith itself. As the night grew cold, the forest whispered with wind and memory. Then came the sound, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. A woman weeping. He turned, lantern trembling in his hand. And there she was. A bride. Her gown was shredded lace, soaked in mud and blood. The veil clung to her face, but through it he saw pale lips mouthing words of prayer. "Who are you?" Lucan whispered. Her voice floated like smoke. "I came for confession." Lucan steadied himself. "Child, you shouldn't be here." She raised her head. "You said that once before." He blinked. "I did?" "Yes," she breathed. "The night I died." The priest felt the world tilt. "No," he said, stepping back. "That's not possible." She smiled then, slow, brittle. "You were supposed to marry us. You were late." Lightning illuminated her face, and he saw the truth. Her skin was half-burned, her eyes hollowed yet shining, as if carrying the last light that had ever touched her. Lucan dropped to his knees. "Evelyn, do you know what happens when vows are spoken in lies, Father?" she asked. "When a man marries out of fear, not love?" She stepped closer, her voice twisting. "God turns his face away. And the crossroads listens instead." Lucan's breath caught. The rain began to fall, soft, steady, and red. Each drop left a stain on her gown, darkening it into something almost beautiful. She knelt beside him, her veil brushing his shoulder. "You told me love was holy," she whispered. "But you lied. You loved me, Father. And that made it sin." He closed his eyes, trembling. "Forgive me." "I already did," she said. "That's why I came back." Her hand reached out, touching his cheek cold as marble. "Now, it's your turn to confess." The crossroads began to hum. The crucifix behind them shuddered, its wings creaking. Lucan felt something deep inside him crack open, not bone, but faith. "I loved you," he confessed, voice breaking. "More than God. More than my vows." She smiled again, and as she did, her face began to fade, dissolving like smoke in candlelight. "Then you're free," she said softly. "But love like that doesn't die. It remembers." The last thing he saw was her bouquet of lilies bursting into flame. When dawn broke, the villagers found Father Lucan slumped against the crucifix, his eyes open, a faint smile on his lips. In his hands was a burnt piece of lace, still warm, smelling faintly of lilies and thunder. And from the forest, carried by the morning wind, came the faintest whisper, the voice of a bride reciting her vows once more. For better, for worse, for death, and whatever waits beyond. Episode 9, The Saint That Never Died. Holiness has a scent. Not of roses, as the church claims, but of dust, incense, and the silence that follows unanswered prayers. They called her Saint Eudora, the woman who never decayed. When she died, her body refused to rot. Her skin stayed soft, her lips pale pink, her eyes forever closed as if she were listening to something beneath the ground. For years, she lay inside the crypt below the ruined chapel near the crossroads, worshipped by the desperate and the damned alike. Until one night, she disappeared. The first to notice was the gravedigger, old Thomas Venn. He'd gone down to light the candles, a ritual he performed each dusk for the comfort of the villagers, but when he reached the stone coffin, it was open. The white shroud that once covered her lay in folds on the floor, and the marble slab had been pushed aside from the inside. At first, he thought thieves had come. But nothing else was touched. The gold cross, the relics, even the silver beads, untouched. Only Saint Eudora was gone. That same night, the bells rang again. From the crossroads. Thomas swore he saw her walking there barefoot, her gown unstained by mud, moving through the storm like someone who had never forgotten the weight of heaven. He followed her, whispering, "My lady." Saint Eudora? She stopped. Her head turned, slowly, too slowly. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a hymn through the thunder. "Why do you call me saint?" Thomas trembled. "Because you never died." She smiled, faint, sorrowful. "That's not holiness, child. That's punishment." He stepped closer, lantern shaking. "But the people, they pray to you. They believe." "Belief," she said, "is the most merciful kind of blindness." Lightning lit her face. Her eyes were open now, glowing faintly, veins black beneath porcelain skin. She looked not alive, but remembered. "Saints are born of faith," she whispered. "But faith can rot. And when it does, something else grows in its place." The ground beneath the crossroads began to pulse, breathing like wet soil. Behind her, the crucifix quivered, its wings spreading wider, feathers cracking, dripping with oil and shadow. Thomas fell to his knees. "Please, what are you?" "I was a prayer," she said. "Once. Before the world stopped listening." She lifted her hand, and with it, the wind screamed. The lantern shattered. In its brief light, Thomas saw hundreds of hands rising from the mud, not ghostly, but human, each clutching a rosary, each mouthless face mouthing her name. Eudora turned to them and spoke with the tone of a priest blessing the dead. "Rise, my faithful. There is no heaven left. Only remembrance." The next morning, the villagers found the gravedigger's lantern crushed near the crossroads. His body was never recovered, but footprints led away, small, bare, countless, all vanishing into the forest. By noon, the church's candles lit themselves. By dusk, every painting of Saint Eudora had wept black tears. And that night, the town's children awoke to a sound outside their windows. Bare feet walking in the mud. When the bravest among them peeked through the cracks, they swore they saw her, the saint, walking slowly between the houses, whispering to the dark. "Pray not to be remembered, my children. The crossroads remembers enough for all of us." Episode 10, The Choir Beneath the Road. It began as a vibration in the earth, soft, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something sleeping below. At first, no one in Velmere spoke of it. The town had learned to fear its own stories. But when the vibration grew strong enough to shake the windows of St. Leora's orphanage, people began to whisper again. Some said it was the bells. Others said it was the voices of those buried too long. But Sister Miriam knew better. She had heard it once before, in a dream. Every night for a week, she'd woken to the sound of singing coming from the crossroads. A choir of hundreds, pure and mournful, harmonizing beneath the soil. The melody seeped into her bones, holy and terrifying. And each morning, she'd find her feet muddy, as if she'd walked there in her sleep. On the seventh night, she decided to follow the sound while awake. The moon was high, pale and cold as bone. Fog curled between the trees, thick enough to breathe. She clutched her lantern and her rosary, each bead slick with sweat. When she reached the crossroads, the air was trembling. The crucifix, charred, winged, and glistening with dew, seemed to hum in time with the melody. The ground below it was glowing faintly, the light pulsing like breath. She knelt. In God's name, what sings beneath you? The soil shifted. A crack opened, wide enough for her to see the faint shimmer of something beneath. Mouths, hundreds of them, carved in stone, moving in unison, singing with voices that no longer belonged to the living. They sang in Latin, but the words twisted as she listened. Gloria Inferni. Gloria Inferni. Glory to the fallen. Sister Miriam stumbled back, crossing herself again and again. But the song followed her. Every echo, every breath of wind carried that unholy harmony. Then the ground bulged. A hand burst through the soil, thin, gray, covered in roots like veins. It reached upward, trembling, as though begging not for help, but for forgiveness. Another hand followed, then another. Soon, dozens of them clawed toward the surface, not to escape, but to sing. The air filled with their chorus, louder, closer, suffocatingly beautiful. Sister Miriam screamed, "You are not his choir." A voice rose above the others, strong, calm, almost kind. "We were, once." She froze. The voice came from the crucifix. Its wooden lips were moving. "Who are you?" she whispered. "The forgotten hymns," it said. The ones he did not answer. The hands reached her feet, wrapping around her ankles. Their touch burned cold. She tried to pull away, but the ground beneath her softened, pulling her down inch by inch. "Sing with us," the voices begged. "He may hear if we sing loud enough." Her lantern fell, flames sputtering out. Darkness claimed her. And for a moment, just a moment, she sang. The melody spilled from her throat without permission, ancient and sorrowful. When the villagers found her at dawn, she was lying before the crossroads, her eyes open, lips frozen mid-song. Her rosary was buried halfway in the mud, beads arranged like musical notes. That morning, the entire town heard the choir again, clearer this time. It came from below the streets, from wells, from every crevice in the earth. Children covered their ears, but the melody still found its way in. The priests called it a haunting. The elders called it a prayer. But the crossroads only called it a rehearsal. Because when night falls in Velmare now, the ground hums again, low, steady, patient, waiting for the next voice brave enough to join the choir. Episode 11, The Candle That Refused to Go Out. Grief, they say, is a kind of prayer. And like all prayers, sometimes it is heard by the wrong thing. Mara Eames had lost her son in the fire, the same fire that had devoured half of Velmare's chapel months ago. The flames had taken him without a scream, only the echo of his laughter swallowed by smoke. They'd never found his body, just his small wooden cross melted into the floorboards. Since that night, Mara walked the roads like a ghost herself, carrying a candle that never left her hands. She lit it every dusk, whispering the same words, "Guide him home." But on the 11th night, the wind did not blow her flame out. It burned stronger. She was standing at the crossroads. The charred crucifix towered over her, its black wings glistening in the moonlight. The air was heavy with the scent of wet ash and old incense. When she placed her candle at the base of the cross, the flame flared blue, pure, unwavering. And then she heard it. "Mama?" Her heart stopped. The voice was small, distant, but unmistakable. Her son. "Jamie," she whispered. "It's dark here, Mama." Tears stung her eyes. "Where are you?" "Under." The ground trembled faintly beneath her feet. The candlelight bent toward the dirt, its flame pulling sideways, as if the earth itself were exhaling. "Jamie, come to me," she said, kneeling. "Follow the light." Silence. Then, softly, "I can't. They won't let me." Her breath caught. "Who, baby? Who won't let you?" The candle flickered, its blue flame splitting into two. Shadows stretched across the crossroads, forming vague shapes, tall, thin, eyeless. "They keep us here, Mama. They say the light belongs to them." Mara gripped the candle tighter. "No," she said fiercely. "This is my light. You follow it, do you hear me?" The flame surged higher, casting a circle of blue fire around her. The shadows hissed, retreating. For a moment, she saw something, a small hand reaching upward through the soil. She reached back, sobbing. "Come home, Jamie." Her fingers brushed his cold, soft, impossibly real, and the world erupted in wind. The crucifix behind her moaned like bending wood. The candlelight burst, scattering sparks that burned without smoke. In their glow, the crossroads revealed faces beneath the mud, hundreds, whispering in unison. "Keep the flame, Mother. Do not let it die." Mara screamed as hands pulled at her gown, trying to drag her down. But she clung to the candle, shielding its flame with her body. "You can't have him," she cried. "You can't have my son." Then, as suddenly as it began, everything went still. The wind stopped. The whispers faded. The shadows dissolved. The flame still burned. In the silence, a single voice whispered beside her ear, small, gentle, and smiling. "I see you now, Mama." She turned, but he was gone. Only warmth remained, and the candle's blue glow reflecting in her tears. When morning came, the villagers found her kneeling there, alive but motionless. Her candle burned beside her, untouched by wind or time. They carried her home, but the flame would not die, not when buried, not when drowned, not even when hidden in the church vault. It burned forever, cold and steady, casting no shadow. And sometimes, when the night grows quiet enough, the mothers of Velmir swear they see a small boy's hand hovering near that eternal flame, holding it upright whenever the wind dares to try. Because at the crossroads, some prayers don't fade. They burn. And they remember who lit them. Episode 12, The Road That Split the Heavens. The storm didn't come from the sky. It rose from the ground. That was what the townspeople said afterward, that they saw the earth flash before the thunder, that the crossroads had called lightning upward. The night it happened, the air in Velmir tasted like metal and fear. Every animal fled into the woods. The church bells, long silenced, began to swing on their own. And above it all, clouds churned like black water trying to remember the shape of God. At the center of it stood Elias Moreau, a scholar turned skeptic. He had come to the crossroads with his journals, his measuring rods, and the arrogance of a man who believed truth could be dissected. "Every miracle," he muttered, "is only a law of nature misunderstood." Lightning crawled across the horizon in answer. He pressed his palm to the mud, ignoring the faint warmth beneath it. The crossroads had been humming for days, the vibration low enough to unsettle his bones. His instruments had all failed, compasses spinning, watches stopping, batteries draining dry. Something was alive beneath this ground. He didn't notice when the humming stopped. He only noticed the silence, a silence so absolute it felt like being held inside a heartbeat. Then the light came. It shot straight through the crucifix, splitting it in two. The wooden Christ exploded into cinders. The crossroads convulsed, cracking open along all four roads, the fissures glowing gold-white from within. Elias fell backward, shielding his eyes. When the brilliance dimmed, he saw it, a staircase spiraling downward, carved into the very earth, every step lined with veins of light. "Impossible," he whispered. The air smelled not of sulfur, but of myrrh. It was the scent of altars, of forgotten worship. He leaned over the opening. From deep below came a faint sound, not voices, not wind, but breathing. And then a whisper rose, gentle as dust. "Descend, Elias. You asked for proof." He froze. "Who's there?" "The one who answers when heaven will not." He hesitated only a moment before beginning his descent. His boots struck stone slick with condensation. The deeper he went, the more the light pulsed around him, soft, golden, and wrong. After 30 steps, he found the first mark on the wall, a handprint burned into the rock. After 50, he saw symbols, Latin intertwined with something older. The writing moved as he read it. At 100 steps, he reached the end. A vast chamber opened beneath him, its ceiling veined with veins of light. At its center stood an altar made of bone and glass, and on it, a heart, enormous, human, still beating. Every pulse shook the chamber. Every pulse echoed the rhythm of thunder above. Elias approached, trembling. "What are you?" The heart shuddered. The light around him dimmed until only that pulse remained. "I am what faith leaves behind," it said. "The echo of belief after the believer is gone." He stepped closer. "You're alive." "No. You are." A bolt of light exploded upward, through the earth, through the storm, through the heavens themselves. It tore the clouds apart, not lightning, but something remembering how to be divine. The people of Velmare fell to their knees as the sky opened, revealing not heaven, but an endless, blinding wound. And when it closed again, Elias was gone. All that remained was the staircase, glowing faintly, and the sound of a heart still beating below, keeping time with the thunder. The crossroads had split the heavens once. Now it waited, patiently, for someone brave or foolish enough to climb back down. Episode 13, The Cross That Dripped Backward. The miracle began at dawn. The villagers gathered before the ruined chapel, whispering prayers they hadn't spoken in years. For the first time since the storms began, the crossroads lay still, silent, almost merciful. The air hung heavy with the smell of rain and burnt wood. And then someone saw it. The old wooden crucifix, the one split by lightning weeks before, was whole again. Its wings, black and twisted, had folded shut, sealing into the body of Christ. From his hands, his side, his brow, blood began to drip. But it wasn't falling down. The blood rose, thin streams reversing gravity, flowing upward toward the nails. The people gasped. Children screamed. The priest crossed himself and whispered, "A sign from heaven." But not everyone was convinced. Among the crowd stood Marta Venn, the widow of the gravedigger who'd vanished with Saint Eudora. Her eyes were hollow, her hands shaking as she watched the red flow climb the wood. "That's not God's doing," she murmured. "That's the cross remembering." The priest ignored her. He knelt before the crucifix, voice trembling with awe. "Blood that defies the earth's pull, surely it is a miracle." Marta's voice cracked like glass. "Or a warning." By nightfall, the blood had reached the carved wounds, sealing them shut. The face of Christ gleamed wet, his eyes darkening until they seemed almost alive. The priest, Father Corin, refused to leave. He kept vigil through the night, kneeling in candlelight, reciting every psalm he knew. He wrote in his journal, "It is as if the cross breathes. As if every drop it reclaims brings it closer to waking." At midnight, The candles went out. The silence that followed was deep enough to have weight. Then came a slow, wet sound, the creak of wood expanding, a breath drawn through unseen lungs. Father Corin froze. The crucifix moved. The head of Christ turned slightly, and a single word slipped from his wooden lips. "Why did you leave me?" The priest fell to the floor, trembling. "My lord?" The statue's mouth twitched. The voice deepened, echoing through the chapel walls. "You prayed for me to return." Tears streamed down Corin's face. "Yes, Lord, yes, I did." And yet, the voice said, each word heavy as thunder, "You would not follow where I went." The air thickened, candles flaring to life with black flame. The cross began to drip again, backward still, but this time it wasn't blood. It was ink, thick and oily, pooling on the floor in spiraling patterns. From that ink rose whispers, familiar voices. The dead of Velmare. Sister Agnes. Father Matteo. The bride. Their murmurs joined, forming a single unholy prayer. We gave him our faith, and he gave it back. Corin crawled backward, choking. "This is not you." The voice from the crucifix smiled through its words. "It is everything you made me." A god of guilt, built from fear. The walls began to bleed upward, the ceiling sagging as though gravity itself had turned inside out. Corin screamed as his body lifted from the floor, pulled toward the dripping cross. When morning came, the chapel was silent. They found Father Corin's journal at the altar, open to a final entry written in black streaks that weren't quite ink. "It is not faith that saves us. It is faith that feeds it." The crucifix stood spotless again, bone-white and clean. No trace of blood, no wound, no sign of life. Except that if you stood close enough, you could hear it breathe. And sometimes, when the wind shifts, the villagers swear they hear a whisper slipping from its lips, gentle, almost tender. "I am risen, but not for you." Episode 14, The Pilgrim Without Eyes. He came at dusk, when the fog was thick enough to blur truth into superstition. The villagers saw him first from afar, a hunched figure walking barefoot through the rain, tapping his staff against the stones of the crossroads. His head was wrapped in a strip of linen, stained with the dull brown of old blood. He was blind. But he never stumbled. When asked his name, he smiled faintly and said, "Call me Pilgrim. Names are for those still seen by God." He claimed he'd been walking for 40 nights, guided not by light but by voices, soft, angelic, singing hymns that led him here. He said they told him this place was holy. But Velmare knew better. The crossroads had long since stopped belonging to heaven. Father Lucan tried to send him away. "You should not stay," he warned. "No road here leads where you think it does." The blind man only tilted his head toward the crucifix, its pale wood gleaming under the stormlight. "I see angels," he whispered. Lucan frowned. "You see?" The man smiled. "Not with these." He touched the bandages across his empty sockets. "With what was left." That night, he refused the inn and slept at the crossroads. Villagers watched from their windows as lightning framed him kneeling before the crucifix. His mouth moved in silent prayer until the thunder drowned him out. At dawn, the children found something in the mud, perfect circles burned into the earth around where he'd knelt, as if a dozen unseen figures had stood beside him. When they told Father Lucan, he went to see for himself. The pilgrim was still there, face lifted to the gray sky, smiling. "They came," he said softly. "They stood where you now stand." Lucan's voice trembled. "Who?" "The angels," the pilgrim said. "They wept for you." That night, the town began to dream. Each sleeper saw the same thing, a procession of eyeless angels walking through the fog, their wings dragging in the dirt, feathers soaked red. And at the center of them, the pilgrim, his face radiant, singing in a tongue none could remember upon waking. By the third night, the dreams bled into waking life. The villagers found feathers in their beds. The church's candles burned without flame. And from the crossroads, faint music could be heard, the sound of wings scraping stone. Lucan confronted the pilgrim one last time. "What have you brought here?" he demanded. The blind man turned toward him. "Faith," he said. "The kind that still sees when the eyes are gone." Lucan's patience broke. "These are not angels. You are being deceived." The pilgrim smiled. "Then let me show you what I see." Before Lucan could step back, the man reached out and pressed 2 fingers to his eyelids. The touch burned cold. The world flashed white and then black. Lucan screamed. When he opened his eyes again, he was blind. But in the darkness, he saw. Figures of light stood all around the crossroads, towering, endless, wings unfurling into the storm. They sang without mouths, their halos cracked and bleeding. Their faces were beautiful and wrong, shifting between divinity and decay. One of them turned to him and whispered, "We were never sent. We were left." Lucan fell to his knees. When the villagers found him the next morning, he was laughing through tears, his eyes burned hollow like the pilgrim's. Both men were gone by nightfall. Only their staffs remained, crossed together at the center of the crossroads. And if you listen on windless nights, you can still hear their voices, 2 men singing to the same unseen choir, praising something that no longer remembers how to love. Episode 15, The Road That Remembered Names. By then, no one in Velmare dared speak the crossroads name aloud. They called it the place that writes. It began quietly, after the storm of the blind pilgrim. Travelers passing through noticed strange carvings along the cobblestones, faint etchings that hadn't been there before. At first they looked like scratches, or the claw marks of animals dragged through the mud. But when the rain washed the dirt away, the villagers saw what they truly were. Names. Hundreds of them. Each stone bore one, some belonging to the dead, some to the living, and some to people who had yet to be born. The first living name appeared at dawn. A merchant, young and ambitious, found his own carved into the stone beside the crucifix. He laughed nervously, called it superstition, and left for the next town before sunset. He never arrived. His cart was found overturned near the river, his horses gone, his body never recovered. The mark of the crossroads stone, his name, was burned into the flesh of his hand. After that, the laughter stopped. The townsfolk began to check the crossroads every morning. Each day, new names appeared. Each night, another person vanished. By the 7th day, Ilara Wynne was the only one brave enough to go there deliberately. She was a scribe, a keeper of parish records, the sort of woman who believed words only had the power one gave them. She carried ink, parchment, and a candle against the mist. When she reached the crossroads, she saw her own handwriting etched across the stones, neat, precise, identical. Dozens of entries, all signed with her initials. But there was one name among them she didn't recognize. Ilara Wynne Witness. The title chilled her. Witness to what? She whispered. The wind answered with silence. She knelt to examine the letters. The stone was warm beneath her fingertips, pulsing faintly, almost alive. Then the pulse grew stronger, syncing with her heartbeat. Something beneath the road breathed. She pulled her hand away, but the ground shifted, and the names began to move, sliding, rearranging, forming sentences before her eyes. They speak what is remembered. They write what will return. Her candle flickered. Behind her, footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, heavy. Ilara. The voice was familiar. Soft. Her father's. But he'd been dead for years. She turned slowly. He stood there, pale and soaked, eyes hollow, mouth twisting into a smile too calm for the dead. "You came to read," he said gently. "Then read what it says of you." Her pulse thundered. "You're not him." He tilted his head. "I'm the memory he left. The crossroads keeps us all. It writes so it won't forget." The stones glowed faintly red now. Ilara looked down and saw the words shifting again, forming a new line. "The scribe will teach the crossroads how to remember." She stumbled back, shaking her head. "No. I won't." Her father's shade reached for her, voice low. "It already began the moment you wrote its name." Lightning flashed. The road beneath her split, lines of light carving through the soil like veins. The carved letters rose from the stone glowing, alive, wrapping around her wrists like chains of scripture. "Ilara," her father shouted, but the voice was fading, his body dissolving like smoke. The stones burned brighter, their words carving deeper into her skin until her breath caught in her throat. When dawn came, the crossroads was silent again. The names were gone. Except one. Ilara Wynne, the one who remembered. Her journal was found at the chapel steps that morning. Inside, a single page. "The crossroads does not kill. It remembers. And remembering is worse." Episode 16, The Confession of the Crossroads Keeper. They said he had always been there. Before the storms, before the saints bled, before the road began to speak. An old man with a lantern, sitting beside the crooked crucifix, whispering to the dirt as though it whispered back. He was called the Keeper. No one knew his name. No one remembered a time when the crossroads existed without him. He never spoke to travelers unless they lingered too long. And when they did, he would murmur one sentence, always the same. "Don't pray here. It listens." For years, the villagers treated him like a ghost who'd forgotten how to die. Until the night he came to the church, carrying a book bound in human skin. "I need to confess," he said. Father Lucan, half-blind and trembling, let him in. The candlelight flickered as the keeper knelt, his voice cracked and low. "It began with me," he said. "All of it." Lucan frowned. "You mean the curse?" The old man smiled, a weary, broken smile. "Curse is only the word the guilty use when prayers go the other way." He opened the book. Inside were hundreds of names written in dried blood. Some were crossed out. Most were not. "The crossroads was never a road," he continued. "It was a door. I opened it." Lucan's breath caught. "A door to what?" "To mercy," the keeper whispered. "At least, that's what I asked for." He told the story in fragments, how, decades ago, he'd been a monk in exile, tending a chapel built where four ancient paths met. During a famine, he buried travelers who died on the road, praying over each body, begging God to remember them. But he didn't, the keeper said. The world forgot them. I watched their graves sink into mud. Their names faded. Their souls went unheard. His eyes glistened like old glass. So one night, I prayed to everything that might be listening. And something answered. Lucan's candle flickered violently. It asked only one thing in return, the keeper continued. That I keep the crossroads open. That I remember every soul who ever passed through. That I never let the road forget. And you agreed? He nodded. At first, it was beautiful. The dead whispered their names to me. I wrote them down. The crossroads glowed with light. I thought I had built a bridge between heaven and earth. His smile faded. But bridges don't choose what crosses them. He looked up at Lucan, eyes hollow. The light went out. The voices changed. They began to ask for prayers I never taught them. They began to sing songs I could not bear to hear. He placed the book on the altar. Every soul it remembers stays here now. They pray, but not to be saved, to be remembered. That is the curse. Lucan whispered, "And you?" The keeper's hands shook. "I am the first one it remembered." Silence. Then the church groaned, wood splintering, walls trembling. The candlelight bled red. From outside came the sound of footsteps, hundreds of them walking through the mud toward the door. "They're coming," the keeper said calmly. "They want me back." He stood, lifted the lantern, and smiled one last time. "When they take me, seal the book. Do not speak their names again." Lucan reached for him, but the door blew open. Wind roared through the chapel, carrying whispers, voices of every traveler who'd ever vanished. The lantern shattered. The keeper was gone. Only the book remained, open on the altar. On its final page, a new line had appeared, written in wet ink that never dried. "The keeper has confessed. The Crossroads forgives nothing." And beneath it, in smaller letters that no hand had written, "Only one remains to be remembered." Episode 17, The Judgment Beneath the Crossroads. The night had ended, the sky above Velmare bled light. The storms had stopped, but the clouds hung motionless, red and gold like a wound refusing to close. The bells, those buried, broken bells, rang by themselves, deep beneath the earth. Every villager felt it, the pull. A weight behind their ribs, urging them toward the crossroads. Some went in silence. Some prayed as they walked. None could resist. By midnight, the entire town stood there, men, women, children, faces pale in the light of a moon that no longer looked human. And at the center, where the crucifix once stood, the ground had split open again. A single staircase spiraled down into a brilliance too pure to be holy. The keeper's book lay open on the altar's remains. Its pages fluttered in the wind though there was none. And one by one, the names inside began to vanish, each erased in the order they had been written. Father Lucan stepped forward, blind eyes lifted. "It's calling them home," he whispered. A voice answered, not from above, but from below. "Home is not where you return," it said. "It's where you are remembered." The sound came from every direction, soft and thunderous, tender and cruel. Then the earth trembled. The fissure widened. And from the depths rose the forgotten, the nun, the bride, the priest, the child who spoke in psalms, even the angel whose wings had turned black. Their faces glowed faintly, flickering like dying candles. They gathered around the townsfolk, silent, waiting. Lucan fell to his knees. "Are you, the saved?" The bride smiled sadly. "No. We are the memory of salvation." Behind her, the light shifted, and something vast began to rise. It was not a figure, but a shape made of names. Countless words twisting together, forming a body that was both shadow and light. Its face was every face that had ever prayed at the crossroads. It spoke again, each syllable vibrating inside every skull. "I was born of their belief. Fed by their fear. You called for mercy, and I became it." Lucan's voice shook. "What are you?" "I am the answer." The keeper's voice, soft, weary, rose from nowhere. "And I am the question that made it." He appeared beside the fissure, lantern burning with black fire. His eyes were gone now, his face half light, half ash. "I opened the door," he said, "but you kept it alive. Every prayer, every tear, every desperate whisper fed it." The ground split wider. The light brightened until it became unbearable. The being of names extended what could almost be called a hand. "Come," it said. "Be remembered." The crowd began to move, not by choice, but by longing. One by one they stepped forward, faces calm, eyes vacant, until the fissure swallowed them. Their bodies dissolved into light, their names appearing in the air before fading into the creature's form. Lucan fought to stay back, clutching the keeper's arm. "If remembrance is all it wants, then forget it. Burn the book, end it." The keeper looked at him with sorrow. "You can't burn what's written in memory, Father." "Then what can we do?" The old man smiled faintly. "We can forgive." He stepped into the light. For the first time, the crossroads fell silent. The book on the altar burst into flame, not black, not red, but white. Every erased name returned at once, brighter than the sun. The being of names screamed, not in pain, but release. Its form began to unravel, scattering into the wind like ash and prayer alike. When dawn came, the fissure was gone. The road lay smooth again, unmarked, empty. The crucifix had returned, plain, unwinged, peaceful. No one in Velmare remembered the night. Not the voices, not the curse, not even their dead. Only Father Lucan remained, blind and alone, standing at the quiet crossroads. He touched the wood of the new cross and whispered, "Amen." Somewhere deep below, faint and distant as a dream, the keeper's voice answered, "Then it is finished." And for the first time in 100 years, the crossroads slept.
The Crossroads That Cursed Travelers, Epilogue. The road is quiet now. No footsteps. No prayers. No names whispered to the wind. Only the sound of rain, soft, patient, like a heart still beating beneath the earth. The villagers rebuilt the chapel months ago. They paved the road, planted flowers where the crucifix once stood. No one remembers why. They call it the old crossroads, a name without a story, a place without a past. But memory never truly dies. It waits. One evening, a boy on his way home from the river found something half buried in the mud, a small brass lantern, rusted but warm to the touch. When he lifted it, the glass flickered faintly with a light that shouldn't have been there. Inside, etched along the metal frame, were words almost too faint to read. "Do not pray here. It listens." The boy frowned. "Strange thing," he said, and brought it home. That night, as the wind crept through the cracks of his window, the lantern began to glow on its own. The flame inside was colorless, pale as moonlight. The boy leaned close, mesmerized. And from within, a voice whispered, soft and kind, "Do you remember me?" He dropped the lantern. It didn't break. The whisper grew louder, layered, not one voice, but many. "Remember us." The flame flared, and shadows bloomed across the walls, shapes of travelers, priests, brides, angels, children, every soul that ever passed through the crossroads. They circled the room like a silent congregation, their faces half forgotten, their mouths moving in a single, endless prayer. The boy backed away, trembling. "Who are you?" "We are what remains when faith forgets." The lantern's light swelled until the entire house glowed. The boy screamed for his mother, but the sound was swallowed by wind. Outside, the rain stopped. At the center of the rebuilt chapel, the earth cracked, just a hairline fracture, nothing more. But through it, faint light pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat returning. Then silence. The next morning, the townsfolk found the boy asleep by the river, clutching the lantern. He didn't remember anything. He couldn't. But when they asked his name, he hesitated, as though he'd forgotten that too. And beneath his skin, faintly glowing in the sunlight, were letters, small, carved like scars. A single word, witness. That night, when the wind blew across Valmere, it carried with it an old, familiar whisper, one last prayer from the crossroads, rising softly from beneath the stones. Remember us, or we will remember you. The lantern's flame flickered once more, steady, waiting. And in that quiet, endless space between faith and forgetting, the crossroads opened its eyes.